Yo, Darius, BRITT here. So today is all about low budget filmmaking tips. So when we talk about low budget or no budget filmmaking, what we're really talking about is resource filmmaking, which is using your pre-existing resources to make a movie. With resource filmmaking, you would start with your resources first and then write a script, shoot it, and base your entire production around what resources you have available to you. But first we need to determine exactly how much you have to spend. It doesn't really matter whether you have 10 bucks or 10,000 bucks. What really matters is that we know exactly what you do have to spend, because this is going to be your budget. First, we need to make a list of our resources. In terms of location, what do you have access to? Your apartment, your mom and dad's house, friend's apartment, offices at your job, classrooms, playgrounds, parks. What do you have access to in your area that you know you can get and shoot without much of a hassle, or for free or for cheap? Make a list of actors that you know who'd be willing to work with you, and friends and family who'd be willing to help you in some way. If you have enough actors where you can pull off for production, whether it be a short film or a feature film, then make a list of the ones you know you can turn to and you can rely on. If you don't have access to very many actors, then you're probably going to have to rely heavily on friends or family, unless you have room in the budget to actually pay for actors. But let's assume that you don't have room in your budget to pay for actors. You're probably going to use friends and family a lot. So in that case, the list that you make, you want to list friends and family who actually have an interest in acting, because someone who's interested in acting is going to do a hell of a lot of a better job than somebody who's not interested in acting. And then on that list, you would ascribe whether someone has had any type of experience or whether this is their first time acting or not. At some point in your production, I guarantee you're going to need some extras somewhere. So you would also make a list of friends and family that you could possibly use for extras. Don't include anybody who's going to give you problems, because trying to shoot a low budget film is stressful enough as it is. Next up, you'd make a list of equipment. Is there any cameras you can borrow for free? Do you have your own camera? Do you have any friends who have lights? Where can you get gear for free or relatively cheap? But depending on your financial situation, you might be able to rent some lights or rent some gear or rent a camera. You're going to want to make a list of any interesting props or objects that you may have access to. Does your dad have a collection of samurai swords or a World War II rifle? Do you live right around the corner from a neighbor who owns a junkyard? You're going to want to seriously sit down and think of what kind of unique objects or items you have access to, so that you can include these in your script later on, should you choose to. Are there any special events that happen in your local area? Is there any, like a gun show or parades or car shows, anything that you can ape free production value off of? Places like these, when you incorporate them into your script, are prime targets for getting free production value and a whole ton of extras. You'll be really surprised how easy it is to sneak into events like this and shoot small scenes or snippets or footage or crowds or things like that and get out without anybody giving you much of a hassle. When you're writing the script, you want to keep your locations to a minimum. So for a feature film, try and use no more than 4 or 5 main locations for a feature, and for a short, maybe 1 or 2. You want to minimize a lot of the travel time that you're going to have, because that's going to cost you time and money. You want to keep your characters to a minimum. Try not to write more than 4 or 5 main characters and a few supporting roles. Definitely don't write any ensemble pieces, because you want to minimize your risk for an actor dropping out on you once you do get casted up. I mean, just in general, the fewer the characters you have, the better, because it'll be easier to manage. This goes for short and for feature. If you know in advance that you're not going to have access to real actors, then you're not going to want to write Oscar roles for your characters, because you're going to be relying on friends and family. So this means do not try to get your mama to cry on camera. You're going to want to write roles that take advantage of the strengths of the people that you do have to work with, because the best position you can ultimately be in is having your brother just play himself, or having your friends and your family just play themselves. You're going to want to write roles that cater to their strengths. Avoid writing scenes where you're going to need a lot of extras unless you know for a fact that you can fill the location up with extras. There's nothing worse than seeing 2 actors in a bar scene and the bar is completely empty. It looks very amateur. The only exception being if you have a budget that would accommodate you to pay extras, then go ahead on and write a few extra scenes, but you want to definitely manage the number of scenes where you're going to need extras. You're definitely going to want to avoid writing a lot of exterior night scenes in your film. They can be very lighting intensive. Lighting an exterior parking lot at night or a big front yard of a house in a neighborhood, it can be damn near impossible to light without the right equipment. When you write scenes like this isn't something that you can skimp on, because if you don't have the money for the lights, it's going to show. Your actors are just going to be floating in pools of darkness. If you have some experience with lighting and you're thinking ahead of time how you can write a scene, but you know exactly how you can light it without having to rent a generator with a ton of lights, then go right on ahead and write a scene like that. But in the meantime, if you don't have experience with lighting and you can't figure out a way to light it in advance, and you don't have money to rent generators and a lot of lights, then just avoid writing exterior night scenes. Trust me, you'll save yourself a lot of headache. Avoid writing in a lot of CG or special effects into your movie, because they can be very costly and time consuming to do, unless of course you're doing them yourself. You can save a crap ton of money if you do it yourself. Yes, it's going to take a lot of time, but the only caveat is, well, you really better make sure you know what you're doing. You don't want to take a movie that you're spending thousands of dollars on and use it as a guinea pig for your special effects, because if you don't know what you're doing, you really don't want it to look like crap. The time to practice and experiment is on other short films or other small projects, not on a feature film or something that you're actually intending to do something with. Definitely location scout, and do it well in advance. You're going to want to drop by the locations that you intend to use and get a feel for the best times of day to shoot there. And you're also going to want to verify that there aren't going to be any issues when you're using the location, because since you're probably getting it for free or for relatively cheap, a lot of times you're going to have to accommodate somebody else's schedule. You're not going to have access to the location until it's at their convenience for you to have access to the location. So you're going to want to work these issues out well in advance before you start shooting. Verify the availability of your actors and your equipment well in advance, because your whole schedule is probably going to revolve around these two main things. If you know most of your equipment is being borrowed from friends and family, well, guess what? You're at the mercy of the time where it's convenient for them to allow you to borrow the equipment. If you're using an actor for free and only promising him credit in your film or something like that, well, you're going to be at the mercy of his schedule. The more planning in advance you do for yourself, the better. You'll save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of headaches. Be selective about when you move your camera. The more you move your camera, the slower you're going to move during production. Don't use a lot of dollies, jibs, and cranes if you, one, don't have the money or aren't able to borrow this type of equipment, and two, don't have the grips to lug that equipment around. If you don't have these things, you shouldn't be writing or using dollies, jibs, and cranes in your film. Simplify your workflow. Believe me, there are plenty of ways to shoot a scene without dollying, jibbing, and craning everywhere, and it can still look nice and it can still look professional. When it comes to feeding your crew, learn how to make spaghetti or any other meal that you can feed a lot of people with for cheap. And if you can't cook it yourself, find somebody who can. You can't really skimp on feeding your crew, because if you're having people work for you and act for you for free, the least you could do is feed them. You don't want a hungry crew on your hands. Trust me, it sucks. Use magic hour and sunset as much as humanly possible. You can get some beautiful professional looking lighting in your film, and you don't have to do much to augment it. It practically lights itself. You can take a scene that's scripted for 12 p.m. story time in your script and shoot it at magic hour. Most people won't even care. They won't even notice the difference. Hollywood does this all the time. I've done it. A lot of my friends have done it. You'd be surprised what you can shoot and get away with, and your audience never really asks questions. There are a lot of things out in the script you may think you need to shoot at high noon and it can only be shot at this time of day, but you can actually shoot scenes like that any time of day, especially at sunset or magic hour, and it doesn't really impact your story. I'd rather choose a time where I can get beautiful lighting that I don't have to do much for than shoot at a time where I'm going to have to do a lot to manage the harshness of the sunlight. It's a headache you don't really want to deal with. When it comes to post, the more that you do yourself, the cheaper it's going to be. It's going to take longer because you're doing it yourself, but you're going to save a lot of money because you're not hiring other people to do it. So i.e., if somebody edits the film, does the special effects and CG for their own film, does the sound design, composes or finds a friend who has music that they can use for free, that person is going to probably pay significantly less in post cost than someone who hires other people to do all of these tasks. Do not use copyrighted music. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get the rights to use it. Get music from friends and family or local bands for cheap, or make it yourself. I notice when people shoot low-budget films and they try to fight against their budget all the time, their work tends to look compromised, whereas when you embrace it and allow it to become a part of your process, you'll be surprised at the number of ideas and alternatives you can come up with to get something well within your budget and get something quality and professional looking. The genres that tend to lend themselves better to low-budget filmmaking tend to be horror films, drama films, and comedy. Action and sci-fi, not so much. There are exceptions, of course. If you're thinking about shooting a low-budget feature, watch other low-budget features. You can get tips and ideas, you can watch how they move their camera. It's a great source of inspiration to see how other people have made great quality product for next to nothing. And also, watching the behind the scenes for low-budget features is like a textbook. You'll be surprised at all the ways that people have found to save money on their productions and still turn up with something really professional. When I was in the writing process for our feature-length film on sound, I must have watched Vin Diesel's Strays at least 50 times. Man, I absorbed that movie like a textbook. Check out Shane Carruth's Primer. That's a great sci-fi flick that was only made for $7,000. You can also check out mumblecore movies. They're kind of like a subgenre of filmmaking that is primarily marked by extremely low budgets, but these guys have managed to make some really good movies for like dirt cheap. You can make a very great, very professional film for little to no money. It just takes a lot of planning, a lot of resourcefulness, and a lot of self-education. The minus is it can be very frustrating and very stressful to do something on such a small budget, but the big bonus is it's within your power to make a film with whatever money you've got in your account when you embrace low-budget filmmaking. And that's all I got for you. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like or subscribe. Hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. There's links below. And yeah, BRITT out. Yo, Darius, BRITT here. Today we're going to be talking about how to make an effective film trailer. One of the most important marketing tools that you have is your film trailer, so it's essential that you do a good job. The purpose of the trailer is to tell the story and sell the story. You're trying to reach your target audience.